here with Chris White from University of Maine, who is conducting the Maine All-State Band 2024. You have an hour off, and you are taking it, sitting down and talking with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Doing something completely different right now is a great thing.
Like sitting down and not
Sitting
conducting.
down, yes, and not conducting.
How are you feeling right now after a full Thursday of conducting the All-State Band, and then it's now 4:15, 4:30 on Friday? You've been going for 8 hours today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, pretty well. It's a long day. It is a long day, and certainly getting a little tired, but the kids are doing great, and we've got some stuff to work on, so I'm focused on that. And tomorrow at around 1 p.m., I think I'll take a nice little break.
After the concert?
After the concert,
Like a 3-month break?
Or something, or at least a nap, in there.
So you were asked to do this festival last year. So you've
Yes, I
kind
was.
of been thinking for a year about what you're going to do and all that. And so tell us about the literature selection process. Not like maybe everything we went through to get there, but what are you doing for lit?
Sure.
Why are you doing the pieces? And maybe what went through your mind? Because I can imagine if you're going to do an all-state band, you're like, oh, I can do all this stuff, but at some point you have to kind of pare it down to a program. And
Yeah. So when you asked me last year at Allstate, the very next day after Allstate, I was in my library and going through pieces that I've done that I think would be good music for them. And that short list was about 50 pieces.
Yeah.
One of the guiding principles, and one of my mentors told me this a long time ago, was never do a festival with a piece you've never done. So that was a limiting factor right there. There's a couple new pieces. I'm like, ooh, that would be fun. But no, we'll do stuff.
did he
that I'm
have
familiar
reasoning
with.
for that? Did you go on and expound on that?
Just because if you've done it once or twice, you know the piece, you know where the problems are going to be, and you can anticipate as much as you can without knowing the ensemble a little bit better. And you're just going to go in, and any nerves you might have being in a new situation or everything will be mitigated by something you're familiar with.
So let's talk about the nerves.
Nerves.
Right? Because like
Yeah.
no matter how many times you've done this, we all get a little nervous when you're in front of a new group of kids.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it takes a few minutes. As I've gotten older, it's a little bit quicker adjustment time with them, and it depends on the group. If it's an adult group, I feel a little bit different, or a professional group, I feel a little bit different than a student group. But yeah, there's always that settle in time. How are they going to react to me? How am I going to react to them? Is everything going to start out well? Is it going to start out bumpy? And those are all things that I just don't know what's going to happen, and those are the things that made me a little bit nervous as I come into a new situation. How's it going to go?
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to talk just a little bit of it here. Like I'll just move it this way.
Oh,
Yeah, we're good.
there we go. Sorry.
And that's fine. We can hear you. I want to hear. I want to hear all of it.
I want to hear all of it. Awesome.
So I also just mentioned to you that your approach has changed throughout the 2 days.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, well, yeah. I said, well, I'm recognizing that. Right. So let's talk about that a little bit too. Like, how did you start out, and then how are you changing as the hours and hours and hours go along?
I started out very focused, and like I told you when I got here, one of the things I need the manager to do is stop me and let them have a break, because I just get focused and go, and that's one of the things I know, and I usually let my student leaders know this and all this stuff, and I'll let you know that, and I'm really focused, and I just go after the music and all the things, and once those things start to happen and they understand where I'm coming from, I lighten up a little bit. And then start changing as we get tighter and everything. It does no good to push hard when everyone's tired. So lighten up a little bit and generally change the atmosphere as we get tighter, and let them know what we're doing and where we're heading, so they understand what we're doing, and talking a little bit more and working a little bit less. So the ratio of talking to playing has changed also towards the end. Get a little bit more breaks.
You have the ability to read the room. You kind of know when they have the energy and when they don't. And then when they don't, you got to change what you're doing. And
Absolutely.
even though this is an all-state band, it's the same as any other high school or middle school or elementary band. You got to read the room and go with what they can do at the time.
And there's no sense in pushing them when they're tired, because it's not going to result.
Yeah, and I can imagine, not only is it great to do an all-state band, but in your own performance space. So you've performed, I assume, hundreds of concerts in the CCA. So you know exactly what the issues are and what's good about that hall. So How have you dealt with that today? Because you're in a completely different rehearsal space than you're going to be performing in.
I've been trying to, halfway through today, I shifted and said, okay, we know everything, we're confident now, let's talk about what we need to do to be successful in the hall. And we've been talking about playing lighter, not overdoing anything and pacing ourselves. A lot of the things in music I like to talk to are like arrival points. And arrival points are kind of be a building point and we're getting there, or it might be the golden ratio part of the piece where it's the big climax of the piece. Those are all arrival points, and we talk about them and pace ourselves because, for instance, in the Of Our New Day Begun, there's several arrival points on a way to a major arrival point, but if they hit the first one where they should be at the last one, it doesn't matter. And that's one of the things that they were doing is they're early on just, okay, crescendo, here we are. Well, now where are we going? So we talked about pacing, we talked about playing a little bit lighter so we can have clarity and have the audience hear all the intricate parts without having that hall will tend to be boomy if we overplay it. So we're a little bit lighter approach so that everyone can hear all the good things that are going on in there.
And so I'm just thinking about score study because of like, I mean, obviously, I would never suggest that don't do score study, right? But some people don't dig in very much. So like, that's an example of you have to know there's all these different climaxes, so we have to pace and wait and all that. And if you don't know what's really going on in the score, it's hard to kind of deal with all that. Do you ever, not, I don't say work on a piece without a score at all, but do you ever do the thing where you're like, I'm just going to put it away for 20 minutes and kind of conduct and rehearse and look at the band and just see how it goes? I don't.
I
very
always
often,
have one
but-
in front of me.
Yep.
Because if something happens, I've got to have that reference. But there was points today where I didn't look down at all and was all over the room.
Yep.
And so forth. And as we get closer to the concert, and even tonight, there'll be a lot more focusing on in the moment and being there. And as a conductor, you're like taking the sound over here and doing this, and then over here, doing this, and kind of like a pipe organ, you pulling this stop, pushing this
Right.
in, and getting the sound and being more with the group. So as I go, it becomes a process of looking less, but I never set it aside.
I definitely feel like when I'm not looking at the score, my ears are better. And if I like kind of look, actually watch the kids playing, I just feel like I hear it completely differently.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I wouldn't be confident too much in a performance to do that without a score. It depends on the piece. Sometimes the piece is like, it's totally fine and I can do that. But I encourage people to try that. From time to time, just look at your kids when you're conducting them. 'Cause
absolutely.
you hear it differently.
Well, what is different about it is when I teach my conducting class, if you're looking at the score the whole time, your mind is hearing what's on the page and it warps what comes into your ear to the page. So they might be doing it wrong, but you hear it right because you're looking.
Yeah.
And the other part of that is the whole, like, we don't text and drive because you can't do three things well at once. You can do two, and when you're driving, you're doing two things. You're being aware of your surroundings and you're controlling the car. You add texting into that and everything drops. Same thing with conducting. If you're reading the score, you're engaged in reading. If you're conducting, there's your physical thing. There's your two things, so your ears aren't there.
Yeah.
So something is going to get diminished. So if you can get your head out, now you're back to two things. So that's another thing I talk about in my conducting classes. Try to get just two things happening and listen.
Yeah. One advice I give people when they're looking at score study, if they're not super strong in music theory and all that, maybe especially as a young teacher, haven't done it as much. This doesn't work when you get to really high level music, but lower experience level music, just look at the low brass parts. They're usually, if they're playing, they're usually voiced out with the notes of the chord and things like that. That's a really good place to start because you don't have to deal with the transpositions. And then when you get to be old and crotchety like we are, like you can look at it and you know what's going on and all that. But, I've never sat down at a score and not learned something. Sometimes I think I know a piece, but then I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize that note doesn't, I haven't brought that note out before. There's a ninth in there that I didn't know about or something. So you mentioned the Omar Thomas piece real quick. We've kind of touched on literature, but so what pieces did you select for this? Tell them what we're doing for music, because we haven't told them.
Oh, okay. So the program is John Mackey's Until the Scars. That's what we're going to open with. And then we're going to do a Hymn for the Lost and the Living by Eric Oazen. And Then we're going to conclude the program with Of Our New Day Begun by Omar Thomas.
So let's go back to the Mackie, Until the Scars. What is, like, a brief, a little bit about what that piece is about and why you chose it?
It is an excerpt from his Wine-Dark Sea Symphony. It's almost note for note in parts of the first movement. And I chose it for a number of reasons. First, it's an opener, or could be an opener. Second, it is John Mackey, and it has nice written percussion parts. I especially like the snare drum writing in this, and it's a nice challenging part. And all the way through, it involves percussion in a very good way where everyone's actively involved in it. Second is, in addition to being an opener, it's got a little bit of something different in the middle. It's kind of rock and roll for band at times, but scored in a way only John Mackey can score. We've got his typical trombone writing. We've got his time signature obscuration, if that's a word. He obscures a time signature by putting 5s over 4s over 3s, while the time signature appears to be sane. Everything else is all around. So he's good at what I like to call writing chaos and making it sound like chaos, but organized chaos and just tons of energy. So I've never done a Mackey piece that a group hasn't liked yet. So that's why I chose that one. It just seemed an obvious choice to keep everyone engaged. Then...
And I will say this was not your preferred first selection of pieces, so we're going to talk about other pieces that maybe you thought about doing as well. But for whatever reason, we didn't get to a point so we had to change. So you had to be a little bit flexible to kind of make all this work. So the Awazin, Hymn for the Lost and Living.
That was a piece that I did probably 12 years ago, and then again 7 years ago with the ensemble. It is a beautiful piece. It is by a composer that most people don't play, and he doesn't write a lot of band literature. He does a lot of brass writing, individual writing, small ensemble writing, and it's just a beautiful piece, well put together from my perspective, and it had some solo parts in it, very musical solos that I thought would be good. And when you said at one point after the auditions, I think you said, "Oh, I've got some real strong trumpets," that piece moved to the top of my list. So
you programmed based on the ensemble you had.
That's why I kept asking, "Hey, so how are the audition results?" And what I have, and once you said that, and I looked at that piece for all the other slow pieces I could do, that one kind of started to move to the top there.
Well, when you talk about what people do for music with any program, a lot of times they say, "Well, it's because I like this piece." Well, you should like the pieces that you're doing 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
But
absolutely.
if it has a huge saxophone solo and you don't have a saxophone player, like, don't do it.
It doesn't matter how much you like it.
I think it's important that people think about the literature they're planning on doing coming up and, like, does it actually fit your kids? And hopefully it does.
Yes.
So.
And this happened to fit the kids.
Yeah.
Then the last piece Of Our New Day Begun, Omar Thomas, is, I was going to say up and coming, but he's already there. He's writing some fantastic material for wind bands and representing a different culture perhaps in some of the writing. This one certainly has some different cultural things, some gospel feel in it and everything. And he just writes so well. And students don't get a chance to play a lot of his stuff. So I thought, I know Allstate, we did a Omar Thomas piece last year, and I thought about that. Well, we did one last year, and I think I asked you a little bit about it, and it's a completely different piece. It's a wonderful piece. It's relevant to the times, and I'm going to speak about relevancy to the times in a moment here, but it was just a great piece for them. And I knew that there would be some sections that would be a challenge in that, but I think that's part of why we have Allstate.
Yeah. Pieces that kids are not going to get a chance to do somewhere else. If anybody's looking for an Omar Thomas piece that's a little more attainable for other groups, I'm planning next year on doing Shenandoah, which is just
that's his newer one.
It's fantastic.
Yep,
it's fantastic.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, so in relevance, we try to do stuff that's a little bit relevant, and a comment was made. Someone looked at my scores. Oh, there's a lot of death here. I'm like, oh yeah. Kind of, sort of, but let's think about it this way. The first piece, we talked about chaos, and right now, the world's chaos. And the Mackey piece does represent that chaos that's going on. Lots of energy, lots of things, it's just chaotic. The second piece was written for 9/11, and yep, it was, but it's also a reflective piece. And how do we deal with all this chaos? We have to come to grips with the chaos that's affecting us from all over in the world. And then hope, because we have to move forward and we have to have hope. And I think the Omar Thomas piece hits that right on the nail, or nail. It's
Nail
the
on
nail
the
on
head.
the head. There we go. It's been a long,
Yeah.
long few days. So I think if you look at it that way, there is an organic feel to this program in there. And I'll talk a little bit about that to the kids. I didn't want to belabor the point because it's all just really good music.
Yeah.
And I do like all these pieces. And that's another part, as you said, never conduct something you don't like. But I think you can add to that, never conducting something you don't believe in, because you have to believe it to sell it to somebody else.
Right.
And I believe in these pieces. I think they're great music. I think there is an organic progression there, and it's a nice program. It's not a traditional program. I know there's no march. There's nothing that's written more than 20 years ago in this program. Well, maybe the Wazen may have been 22 years ago. 20,
Yep.
But yeah, that's relatively new stuff. I get it. And so for people who like a traditional program, it may not be for them, but yeah, it's good music.
So what are some of the other pieces that were like your desert island that first came to your mind that maybe we don't get a chance to do, whether you even brought them to me or not?
Oh,
But
geez.
you said 50. We don't need to talk about 50, but what are some other ones that you thought would have fit this band?
Well, the Gandalf, that was on my list. And
The first movement from
yeah, the first movement, yeah, from the Demai, that was on my list. In fact, I did it with a symphonic band this year. Alleluia Laudamus Te, fantastic opening piece of music.
Howard Hansen?
Yeah,
No.
Alfred Reed.
Alfred Reed.
Yeah. Yep. And then, so that was a couple of my openers in there.
We talked about Molly on the Shore at one point.
Yeah, I wanted to do Molly on the Shore. I thought that would be great, and I didn't know, hindsight being 2020, that
It would have killed.
oh yeah, this band would have knocked that out of the park.
Yep.
For that. So Molly on the Shore was on that list. There was a piece because I like to do something different. So if I hadn't done the Mackey, there was a piece by Jeff Tyzik, the Three Latin Dances. Fantastic piece, and it's music written for it. It's not collegiate, it's not high school. It's just music written for professionals, I guess, because he doesn't care about the ability level of the player. He just writes the music, and that was going to have some issues with it, but it was fun. And it had a lot of different styles. It was good for the percussion section. And it's a different style of playing that kids probably would not get in their school program. So that piece was on my list. I wanted to do to Kelly's new piece, and the name has just gone right out of my head. The long, slow one that he did. And
Do you want me to look it up?
yeah, why don't you look it up?
Let me look it up. Okay, we got the name of the piece.
So it's Lux Perpetua by Frank DeKelly. I wanted to do that one. It's gorgeous writing, but it's a little over 12 minutes long. So
And in Maine, we have a
25-minute limit.
yeah.
So I didn't think it would be good to do only two pieces at Allstate. You know, a 12-minute one and a 9-minute one put me almost at the end. So
Yep.
So I took that off the list, and I had a few others that were in that 12-minute range. The Alfred Reed Armenian Dances.
Yep.
Be a great piece, but it's just a little bit too long.
Yep.
And so forth. So the long pieces were there, and then when I realized the time limit and started putting things together, time was also a consideration.
So one thing that I think is pretty special too is that you're somebody who's from Maine in this state, but I'm just going to say this in general. You're from a state, you've been able to teach here since 1993, sorry, you need credit for that year, 1992, at the collegiate level, doing the All-State Band, being from Maine and doing it in Maine. That's probably, I don't know if it's hit you yet, but how cool and special that is. You were talking earlier about being able to raise your family and have your job and not have to leave the state and all those things.
Yeah, I talked to the band about it last night, and I got a little choked up about it because in 1984, I was in the All-State Band. and I was playing percussion, and that was my senior year. And yeah, I decided I was going to study music. Didn't know where I wanted to go. I found a school that had a really cool looking brochure, and that's where I went. It turned out to be Ithaca College, and I had a great experience there. I was lucky enough to come back to Maine and teach. But it was the all-state experiences that really, really opened up doors for me, being there and seeing all the possibilities. And it was a really emotional moment when I talked to the kids about 40 years ago I was there, and now I'm here. And where can you be in 40 years? You don't know what's going to happen to you. And so the point I made is doors are going to open because of this experience, and step through them because you don't know. And how cool is it to be in Maine and teach your whole career in Maine? It's wonderful. It's a great state. It's a great state to raise a family in. My family's from Dexter, Maine, and we have summer property there. So I've been able to raise my children and have them see my parents and my grandparents while they were alive. So yeah, the whole thing, career, family, and all that has been absolutely wonderful. It was also accidental. I don't think I ever planned on it happening.
Yep.
I knew someday, yeah, boy, I'd like to teach college someday. That was in the back of my head somewhere. And then after 4 years of public school, I got an assistantship in 92 to 94. And my assistantship was directing the marching band, pep band, and concert band. And at the end of that, it turned into a full-time job. I applied for it. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've been here ever since.
And when I talk to a lot of people about you, this is going to be a compliment. I don't know how you do deal with getting compliment, but one of the things they always say is that you work really hard, that you're a tireless worker, and like you're never going to let hard work stop you from getting where you want to be. And I think that's something that I see in younger teachers. The ones who are really successful are the ones who are willing to work hard, and the ones who want the job to be easy might be disappointed.
It could be, and easy and time consuming, I think, are the things we talk about. And yeah, there's a lot of work, but I don't work. I get paid to do what I love.
Yep.
And what do I do at the University of Maine? I direct the marching band and pep band, and for a while I did the concert band. When Mr. Farnham, one of my best mentors ever, retired, I was able to get the symphonic band as part of my assignment here. So I've just been really, really blessed and lucky to have the opportunity to be a band director. What do I do all day? I direct bands.
Yeah.
And I get paid for it. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I got paperwork and I teach some classes too, but I direct 3 bands and I have, 65 to 75 performances a year with the groups. It's doing what I love to do.
Yeah. So you've got another hour and a half or so of rehearsal with the kids, and then
I do?
tomorrow morning dress rehearsal and performance.
Yes.
So you're going to try to tidy up a couple little things as we finish up. But have you thought about what the performance is going to be like and your ability to maybe try to soak it all in while also performing really well? I don't know if I'm asking that correctly, but are you going to enjoy it?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it if I didn't.
Good.
Yes, I will. And yeah, it's going to be fun. The kids are going to do great. And it'll be nice to be on that stage. It'll be great to have the energy from the audience feed in, because a performance needs to have observers and an audience. And that energy hopefully will feed into everything that we're doing. And the performance is not going to go as the rehearsals went. It's going to go both ways.
Yep.
And we just have to be ready for that.
Because there is no perfect music. Like, that's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, perfection at any level doesn't exist because it's so subjective.
Yeah. So you've spent some time at UNT, and I only spent a week there or whatever. But I remember Corporon saying one time, "Don't try to make your ensembles try to sound like the UNT Wind Symphony, because we don't sound like that." He's like, we do the recording, and then we would edit it and do all those things too. So that chasing perfection is hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Last question I have for you, are you someone who speaks a lot to the audience between pieces? Somewhere in the middle, none at all? Where are you?
At the university, I like to do program notes so they can read about it. What I find is my mind is going 1 million miles an hour at a concert, and it's not necessarily thinking about chatting with people. It's thinking about the ensemble,
making sure everything is right.
And so I will talk to the audience. in between the last two pieces, do some thank yous and so forth, and maybe tell a little story about 40 years ago,
Yep.
me being up there and all that stuff as I thank the MMEA. So I'm really kind of focused on
Yep.
that. So when I talk, sometimes stuff comes out, as you just saw, backwards,
Yep.
hitting hammers and with nails and what. So,
Well, I think it's important that people know, like, you have to be yourself.
Yeah.
There's times when I want to talk to the audience, but other times it's like, it's not about that right now. So I love it. Well, good luck.
well, thank you very much.
been
And
fun.
thank you for asking me. It has been an honor and a real treat to be able to do this and to work with the best musicians in the state. So I thank you for the opportunity and the Maine Music Educators Association.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.